Once upon a time, a dramatic and terrifying event took place on the 23rd of November, 1996. 20 minutes after the departure of Ethiopian Airline Flight 961, a man stood from his seat and ran up towards the cockpit. As he was running, two other men followed him up, closely towards the front of the plane. As the men ran past the passengers, a man shouted to everyone on board to stay seated at all costs, threatening that they have bombs with them. When they arrived at the cockpit door, they slammed it open and confronted the two pilots, while also threatening the pilots. They lied that there were 11 hijackers on board, and they wanted to fly across the globe immediately. Just immediately after the plane was hijacked, the captain of the aircraft, Mr. Abate, had a few things running through his mind on how to convince the hijackers that they have no much fuel in the aircraft and wanted to save his life and that of others on board. Mr. Abate, who had flown well over 11,000 hours in his time as a pilot, and in those now the thought of getting hijacked 3 times is a ridiculous anomaly. And since Mr. Abate had dealt with hijacks in the past, he likely remembered some significant details about what was going on. However, there will be a bit of a problem this time because no matter what Mr. Abate remembered, these hijackers would be a bit different. It was meant to be a short flight, but the 3 hijackers had the different plans. After they were on record telling the pilots that there were 11 of them on board, right away they reportedly beat the first officer and forced him out of the cockpit. They then went ahead and grabbed emergency safety axe and emergency fire extinguisher and asked Mr. Abate to change the destination from Kenya all the way to Australia. Now, flying all the way to Australia would impose more than a few problems. Firstly, the amount of fuel and heat won't take them to fly across the globe. The amount of fuel in the plane will only take them to Kenya and won't be able to take them to Australia. But for some reasons, the hijackers weren't having it. They have reportedly read on our in-flight magazine on the plane that the type of Boeing 767 that we own could fly a max capacity of 11 hours. To the hijackers, Mr. Abate was lying to get an emergency landing. Mr. Abate, however, refuted strongly and insisted that he wasn't flying, showing the men the fuel indicator on the plane only indicated enough fuel to Kenya. Still, the hijackers didn't care and continued to threaten Mr. Abate, saying that if he didn't meet their demands, they would do the job themselves. There was no way that they were going to make it, even remotely. They left the African coast immediately. Over the ocean, there was little to nothing they could do. But even with this knowledge, it seems like the hijackers, no matter what they were told, they would still deny the pilots advice. They would act weird and refuses all the advice Mr. Abate has been telling them. After this frustrating interaction, 2 of the men left the cockpit and ordered everybody on board to put their heads down and stop talking. Afterwards, the men then took 2 of the flight crew and seated them both close to each other and demanding that they make an announcement in 3 languages to everyone on board, telling them that the plane has been hijacked and their destination will be changed. The crew members, however, in fear, made the announcement.
Your destination has changed. Do not interfere. If anybody tried to interfere, they would use the explosive device.
At this point, it was hard to imagine how this would end up playing out. With no refueling stops, it seems like the hijackers just want the plane to run out of fuel over the ocean. So for a final last-ditch effort, Abate advised them to land the plane at Mabasa. It was near the sword closer to Australia, but as expected, the hijackers refused and ordered Mr. Abate and the crew to fly over the ocean immediately. They then forcefully asked Abate to turn left. In this situation, Abate likely knows how this will end out if they eventually flew over the ocean. So this time, on a more certain seriousness, Mr. Abate strongly declined the hijackers from attempting their foolish plans to fly to Australia. But instead of cooperating, the leader of the hijackers wanted Mr. Abate to call an Australia center to inform them of their arrival. They started looking through the flight's timetable to find a number to call to Australia. Mr. Abate used this opportunity to ignore them and instead called the company radio, informing them of the amount of fuel they had and the flight path that they were on. He knew calling the Australia likely wouldn't change much, but when the hijackers realized what he just did, they had to snatch the headset off his head, now finally forcing him to turn left with no more choice. Abate finally turned left to Australia, and shocking after realizing that they were finally on the way to Australia, the leader decided to relax by sitting in the first officer seat and started messing around with the control center while drinking whiskey and kicking the rudder. Abate, seriously concerned, adamantly continued to warn the hijackers for the lack of fuel that the plane had. The hijackers was left with no lack of fear for humanity. The hijackers could not understand the level of danger they had putting these people in the plane on. Abate, still in a confused state, could not understand the reason for their action. He knew from experience that people usually have a reason, and in any crisis like this, the most important part is understanding. But unfortunately, control has slipped from Mr. Abate's hands. He can only watch as chaos unfolded. At this point, it became clear to Mr. Abate that the hijackers had no interest or care towards the safety and survival of the plane and its passengers. It also became clear that the hijackers having a bomb in the plane are all lies, well as the 11 of them on board. As they flew further, eventually reaching a critical level, the hijackers talking to themselves for so long, instead of just turning out into the empty Indian Ocean, which could have been more safer and fatal. Abate originally turned left towards Australia. He made the calculation decision to fly towards an island he haven't even seen before, the Comoros, a small group of volcanic islands in the Mozambique Channel near Madagascar. Mr. Abate figured out that once the hijackers see the plane running out of fuel, he could convince them to let him slide and land there for the safety of their lives and that of others on board. So without informing the hijackers and still flying on the general direction of Australia, Mr. Abate headed towards the island on the ocean, prioritizing the safety of the passengers and his. It was clear enough that Abate had to take full control of the situation as the hijackers, who was intoxicated from whiskey and becoming increasingly angry and chaotic, was unsafe and uncooperative. Abate could no longer cooperate with them. So finally, after flying towards the direction of the Comoros island, Abate saw them come into view and began to circle them in order not to let them in by distracting them. The hijackers, who had previously told Abate not to descend below a certain height, demanded to know what he was doing at that point. And so, the critical low fuel indicator appeared on the plane, and Abate, who had already started his plan, pleaded not stop with the men to allow him land the plane at the Comoros Channel. The hijackers, still completely unconcerned, denied his request. At the same time of their threats, however, the right engine of the plane lost power. Abate at this point tried everything in his power to convince them, showing the leader the critical indication of the plane right engine, telling the man that they are now in a more serious, dangerous situation. Finally, the hijackers reacted to this. They left the cockpit and went towards the entrance of the door. As they were still talking, however, with no hijackers around to stop him, Mr. Abate realized that he finally had an opportunity to call for help. At once, he used this one unholy chance to send a message across to everybody on board through the intercom.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your pilot. We have run out of fuel, and we have lost one engine of that. We're expecting a crash landing. And I asked everyone in the plane, so we had to the hijackers.
The hijackers, who became seriously annoyed, returned enough information after Mr. Abate asked. Mr. Abate, more concerned about the plane, knew that the speed of the aircraft would drop significantly because of the right side engine. So he began to descend the aircraft, maintain speed and control it, hoping to save the plane from engine. But he came shortly. The leader of the hijackers reacted to this by violently moving and playing around with the control, ended up disconnecting the outside pilot, which sent the plane into an unpredictable and random speed level. And then the next engine began. Mr. Abate was forced to glide over the Indian Ocean right above the Comoros island. Now, with the hijackers' intense disapproval, he angrily shouted at Mr. Abate not to go any lower. Mr. Abate pleaded with the hijackers that the fuel has been exhausted and now the plane has been left with completely zero power. Now the hijacker seems more serious about his demand and ordered Mr. Abate not to descend further, threatening to seriously hurt him if he didn't listen. Mr. Abate clearly fed up with this guy. At this point, he responded to his threat, saying,
I am already dead because I'm flying a plane without engine power.
the plane descending rapidly and getting dangerously close to the water. Inside the cabin of the plane, however, the first officer, who had previously been beaten and rejected from the cockpit, was left with no choice than to start telling the people on board to put on their life jackets. It was a bit difficult to pass the message across to everyone on board because not everyone on the plane understands English. Knowing fully well that this may cause issues between him and the hijackers, but never mind, making sure that everyone on board puts on the life jackets. So he had to tell some of the flight crew to assist the passenger putting on the life jacket while he ran up to the cockpit. With the hijackers refusing him to come into the cockpit area, he forcefully squeezed himself into the place and sat on a seat. After being seated, he started helping Mr. Abate out, knowing that the plane would crash at any moment. Mr. Abate and his assistant tried as hard as possible to stabilize the plane. The hijackers themselves still continued to mess around with the control sets, creating a complete uncertain and chaotic situation around. At this point, the plane was just some feet away from the water, just barely off the coast of the island, and the aircraft was running almost nothing. The meter indicated that they were 150 feet above the water, and the flight crew, who has done everything possible to save the passengers on board, were now left all alone. Mr. Abate and his assistant, who tried so hard to take full control of this massive aircraft, the plane continued to fall rapidly, descending into the water. Now they are left with no choice than to face the worst outcome of what's about to happen. Mr. Abate and his assistant were now forced to prepare Ethiopian Airlines Flight 961 for a digging into the Indian Ocean. Of the beach side of the water, a tourist who was enjoying the beautiful atmosphere, recording a good high holiday. It was a beautiful afternoon. However, seeing something falling rapidly from the sky seems weird to her, so she fixed a camera over the spot to take a clearer view. And so, Flight 961 descending from the sky into the Indian Ocean. Mr. Abate and Vianes, his assistant, kept on paying some attempt to land the plane carefully, but it didn't turn out as expected. This caused a number of passengers passed out. And for those that were almost dead, we rushed to the nearby hospital.
I was ready to cooperate with them. I told them I will do anything and I showed them there is an island here. It's way out of Africa. So this is your last chance to refuel. They said, no, we don't need any fueling. We'll go as far as the aircraft flies, then we crash. I said, if you don't want to reach your aim, and if you want to die in the air, why do we have to kill all those innocent people? They said, never mind, we're making history. Anyway, I just went out of the cockpit. It was a miracle.
You've survived a major plane crash. You're incredibly lucky. Floating in the water, bobbing, just like a chipmunk in a lawn chair like this. I had no idea how I'd gotten there. I'm out there alone in the sea. There's some trash, coffee mate on the water. I'm bleeding badly in my hand and my foot. Almost instantly, I looked for my wife, and she had been sitting on my right, and she was gone. My heart sank. And then I looked quickly to my left, and she was there, also bobbing in the water, also with her seat. It's the same thing as mine exactly. And she had never blacked out. I said, "Are you okay?" And she said, "I'm okay."